Good afternoon. I'm here with three very distinguished individuals who have created and continue to create visionary architectural projects that touch the lives of millions of people. We're here to discuss the future of such projects at a time when the very idea of the future has become frighteningly unpredictable and provisional. Achilles talked about culture in 10 years' time. At the moment, that feels a long way away. Now, let me start with Stefano. As I understand it, an inspiration for this year's triennial is the recently published History of Tomorrow, by the Australian philosopher Roman Krznaric. Now, this discusses the difficulty of overcoming the tyranny of the present imposed by the pace of geopolitical events and the power of social media. How do you think we can create a culture of tomorrow when we are tyrannized by today? And how does that relate to the whole issue of inequality? I just thought we'd start with a really easy, simple question.
Thank you so much for the question. So I think that book is amazing. It's a book where you understand that sometimes studying the past is crucial if you want to be aware that the present that we are now experiencing is not the unique possible present. And what he wrote in that book is extremely fertile and also from a certain point of view intriguing. And it reminds me also something that we are hosting in this exhibition, Inequalities. Just to give you an example, I think that what Chester Gates just explained, what Chester Gates has exposed on the first floor of Triennale. So this idea that traditional aircrafts could be and could have been amazing, let's say, social elevators, amazing ways to improve the quality of life of millions of people. It's in itself a lesson that we should learn if we want to understand how to change the present condition of, let's say, many components of our urban societies. And this is only one example to confirm that sometimes when you go back to the past, when you work on archives, for instance, and you study how some serious troubles were, let's say, faced and solved in the past, this could teach you how to change the present conditions. And then this is strictly connected with the issue of inequalities, for sure. I think, I repeat that inequalities is, for me, a necessary key entry if you want to decipher how to face the main challenges of the future.
Okay. Norman, the Israeli historian Yuval Noah Harari, who's the author of *Sapiens*, not so long ago said that income inequality was one of the three central threats to humanity, along with nuclear war and climate change. Now, you're addressing the issue of income inequality in terms of, in your exhibition, Towards a More Equal Future. You address the global housing crisis in emergency contexts. Could you tell us some more about how you're dealing with a specific issue?
I think there are a range of projects, and if we start perhaps with the big issue of some 14% of humanity, more than 1 billion, who live in informal settlements or slums, the words are interchangeable, which means they don't have adequate shelter, modern sanitation, clean water, electricity. So how do we address that? The conventional solution is to bulldoze them, to relocate those communities, often away from their source of livelihood. So with the foundation team, we worked with another foundation, the Tata Foundation, on the proposition that those communities were not communities of despair, but rather of hope, with a very strong sense of identity and place, and demonstrated that within just little more than working on site with that community, identifying the interest groups, 3 interest groups. It was a fishing community in the Indian province of Odisha, and saw the transformation from within of introducing recycling of waste, modern sanitation, public space. So I think that the challenges of, and interestingly, that's not, that crisis is rather like the refugee crisis, which is another project. It's not considered architecture, but if architecture is about the quality of life, surely it's the very essence of architecture.
But what struck me was that, and we spoke about this earlier, I think you're the first major architect since Jean Prouvé to really engage with prefabricated structures. Now, he was dealing with the crisis of homelessness after the Second World War. We're starting to get to a point where we're dealing with catastrophes on a similar level. So could you just briefly tell us a bit about the detail of these prefabricated structures, which are, I think, incredibly important?
Well, the refugee unit started with a workshop in the foundation, and the scholars, the students, quite rightly challenged the premise that a family would grow up through generations, 10 to 20 years, in a canvas tent, and suggested that there had to be a better solution. Why could you not build something in a matter of days that would be more durable and more dignified? And that produced, at last year's, 2 years ago, the Biennale in Venice produced a pavilion to demonstrate a unit. And that unit was influential in all kinds of unexpected ways. So government officials from Costa Rica saw it and said, maybe this is a model for affordable housing. And what happened is that we then developed that idea as a row house, a more compact version. And so now we can deliver really high quality, affordable housing at scale of 500. So, for example, a 2-bedroom, living room, dining, bathroom, kitchen, porch for 13,000 euros, which for a dwelling is an extraordinary breakthrough. Absolutely. But that's using prefabrication. And there are other projects in the exhibition which show more sophisticated versions, Lego-like building blocks, the idea of a building coming off an assembly line, very much like in the tradition of Prouvé and others.
Wonderful. Sheikha Mayassa, the title of this discussion is Culture for Tomorrow. The title of this conference is Art for Tomorrow. But in the world, we're living in a world that's in such a state of tumult at the moment. And everyone is preoccupied with today, and it's difficult to visualize tomorrow and a future, in a sense, a constructive, hopeful future. How have you been constructing a positive sense of tomorrow in Qatar?
First of all, I would like to say thank you to Stefano for hosting us here. I really enjoyed being part of the Triennale this morning. And for those of you who haven't visited, you should definitely see, and definitely Sir Norman's installation is also very inspiring. In terms of Qatar's strategy, I mean, I've heard earlier today a lot of people talking about pessimism and optimism. As a nation, I think we remain quite optimistic about the state of affairs. Qatar plays a very active role politically in trying to mediate amongst conflict zones and nations that are in conflict. From a culture point of view, I think we've also used that as a form of mediation in terms of inviting people from all parts of the world to discuss in dialogue the different aspects, point of views that we can engage and invite to express their views artistically. And as you know, culture is an open space. There is no hierarchy. You can you can have a lot in your bank account, you can have nothing in your bank account, and you're still invited to participate. And I think it's quite democratic in that sense. Obviously, for those of you who have not been to Qatar, we've built a 25-year strategy under the national vision of Qatar 2030. This year we're celebrating 20 years of that, and we've tried to invest really in creativity and innovation through giving platforms for Arab designers from all around the world in different industries, whether it's fashion, film, design, art, performance, music, to come and to support them, give them residencies, not just in Qatar, but around the world, and really just empower them to have a voice and to tell their own stories. Culture becomes a necessity, therefore, and not a luxury. I think when a nation starts to use culture as a form of public relations, it becomes a problem. Qatar has chosen to use culture as a means of a real investment and human development, and we've seen the economic impact of that. I mean, Norman built our amazing stadium for the World Cup, and I think for those of you who've come or watched even on TV today, as I visited the Triennale, some people commented on how amazing that experience was. But that was really the epicenter of merging art and sports together, and I think everybody who came left optimistic, hopeful about a better future.
Okay.
Not forgetting how much we were criticized before that.
And how big a role is the construction of your superb museums? How does that sort of infuse a sense of hope?
So that's an interesting question, because obviously, as I said, we're 20 years now. We have 4 museums in operation, and we're building 4 new museums and a school. We've decided that with all of our future museums, we're going to be engaging, as I call it, the global south. We choose to engage artisans and craftsmanship in realizing the designs of actually Western architects. We have the Lusail Museum, which is Herzog de Meuron. It's our next museum on Al Maha Island, across from the stadium and the Norman Towers, actually. It's the future city in Qatar. It's innovative, it's high tech, but we keep this island as the heart of the future city, because it's all about culture, creativity, innovation, and we focus on local craftsmanship, but also, utilizing the traditional craft of our region, looking east. I mean, I see Guyana here. We would love to work with Uzbekistan. I've visited some of the ateliers and artisans there. They have amazing quality craftsmanship. So why not show them off to the world alongside the world-class collections that we have collected, sure, alongside Pritzker Prize HDM building.
Okay. Stefano, I'd like to congratulate you also on the Triennale. I've run around in 20 minutes, half an hour, but I was enormously impressed, mainly by the fact that the exhibition really deals with tough, real issues, which the art world generally avoids, and deals with them in a very eloquent way, I think. So congratulations, I think it's really superb. But what I would like to ask you is that, is there an intended or unintended irony in the fact that Triennale, the theme is inequalities, but it's taking place in a city, Milan, where residential real estate values have increased by 49% over the last decade, forcing lower income workers out of the city and prompting students to protest at the lack of affordable accommodation?
No, I believe that this is one of the reasons we decided to let's say, to select this as a main issue also for the local politics. And you're right. The average cost of rents in Milano grown up of, let's say, the average was 22% the last 10 years, and the average income was grown up of 12%. So this is absolutely true, and also it's true that this happened in the part of the city, in the areas where, let's say, in the poorest part of the city, where the income were growing at all. So I believe this issue is a necessary key entry for any public policies today. And that's why we are inviting the municipalities, the regions, and also the Minister of Culture and Minister of Foreign Affairs this morning to let's say, to talk about that and to study how could be possible to intervene, trying to a little bit rebalance this unacceptable contradiction.
Because isn't something like the Triennale part of the problem? Because one of the great sort of mechanisms of gentrification and unaffordability in housing is when the artists and the curators move in, and the international art crowd, like us. So there is a little bit of a paradox here, isn't there?
I think, yes, you're right. There's something that we know. It's, let's say, something happening all over the world. At the same time, we have to understand how to compensate this, let's say, kind of lateral effect of extension of cultural presence in the city. For instance, what we are doing here and what we will do in the next 6 months is to export the exhibition in all the external districts in Milano. So we will be part, together with Bocconi University and together with other institutions, of an effort to, let's say, reproduce on the periphery what we are doing here. And that's one way to compensate what you are saying about gentrification. Yeah. I think there is not this is not a simple question. It's something which is quite complex, but absolutely true.
Okay. Norman, I wanted to ask you, in terms of public perception, your architecture has always been characterized as being futuristic, an architecture for tomorrow. And I was interested, you said that you're not so interested in the past, you're always interested in the tomorrow, in the future. You find that more interesting. But I wonder how your conception of the future has changed over the years through your career, and how that has affected your practice and modified it.
If I go back to the birth of the practice, which was the 1960s, you could argue historically that the 1960s was the birth of the green movement of sustainability, even though those words were not used at that time. So you had the Apollo mission that took the photograph Earth rising and revealed for the first time photographically the razor-thin protective layer of the atmosphere. You had Rachel Carson invoking the word ecosystems. You had systems theory. You had Buckminster Fuller talking about planet Earth and the operating manual. So at that time, we were trying to respond with an architecture which was about harvesting energy, about new forms of agriculture, about recycling. All of these were probably at that time fringe. For some, almost the lunatic fringe. And the interesting thing is that over time, that has now become mainstream. And somewhere in the middle of that was a project like the Reichstag, where we were, through advocacy, able to arouse the political conscience of those creating their house, being the parliament, to consider that it could be a national emblem in terms of a carbon-free energy manifesto. So I think the big change, in short, is public perception, and now there's a groundswell there.
Yes, because you seemed at the time a little bit of an outlier, but the sheer beauty of your buildings won people over. But you were very, very different. But now, well, mainstream is the wrong word, but you're an establishment figure.
I think it's demonstrating also that to be sustainable, we don't have to wear a hair shirt.
You're not wearing one.
That you can have an extraordinary quality of life and you can be sustainable. And it's a wider argument. One needs to look, you somehow have to take it away from emotion and come down to data. So for example, if we talk about nuclear and you look at the data, nobody has died from nuclear waste. Quite the reverse. Its virtue is that it's totally controllable. Whereas, between 7 and 10 million people, mostly young children, die every year through the 40 billion tons of noxious gases that we emit in the atmosphere.
Which is the point you make very well in your exhibition. Yeah, absolutely.
So we need to take emotion out of these decisions about the environment and come down to the data, come down to facts.
But on the other hand, there's plenty of emotion there. You're still incredibly enthusiastic about the future, aren't you? And
Absolutely.
That's a constant.
Absolutely.
Sheikha, I wanted to ask you about you've got an exhibit at the Venice Biennale of Architecture, and you have a Qatar pavilion, which will be a permanent pavilion in Venice. What it looks at is how contemporary architecture responds to community needs and reimagines a sense of belonging. You're constructing a huge smart city at Lusail, aren't you? How do you create a sense of belonging and community in a city where, like most modern cities, people just sitting at home on phones ordering Uber Eats? How do you create a sense of community in these environments?
I think for us, we really focused on two main pillars for community, which is culture and sports. And that's, when you come to Qatar, you feel a sense of community. When you come to our exhibitions or our museums, you see the diversity of people. Qatar is a very diverse nation. Even for our Venice pavilion, for example, we've made it a commitment that this will be a Qatar national pavilion, but a platform to show Arab talent, because we have so many different nationalities living in Qatar, and we really want to support talent and take them globally. So, it's interesting you asked me about our pavilion and the Giardini, because we installed the Yasmin Lari Community Center, which was part of the Manzar exhibition we did last year on Pakistan. It was the first exhibition ever done on Pakistan modern and contemporary art plus architecture since the partition. Nobody has ever done that survey. And I'm happy to say that this exhibition is now going to Islamabad in the fall, at the request of His Highness and the Prime Minister of Pakistan. The question is, why was there never an exhibition or a survey on Pakistan modern contemporary artists and architecture? And when I saw Yasmin Lari, she didn't come to Doha, but she came to Venice. I don't know what to make out of that. But when I saw her at Venice, she said, you have to come to Pakistan. I said, I did come to Pakistan in 2005. And she said, yeah, but you have to come visit the poor, not the rich. I said, I went to Pakistan because of the earthquake and I only visited the poor. And she was very shocked and surprised, because she had this, obviously, stereotype that I only came to Pakistan to see the rich. So it's very important for us as a nation, because everybody sees Qatar now as a rich nation, and it's very easy target to say, oh, it's a rich nation. It does this because it has money, but it's not. It has not always been the case. Qatar was a bankrupt country. It had no money. We had to loan to pay people's salaries, etc. But it took a vision, and it took a bold vision with a clear strategy and a national vision 2030 to transform the country into one of the richest countries in the world. But that didn't just happen by accident. That happened with planning, with understanding our communities, understanding our needs, and taking risky decisions that could have gone either way. So you haven't been to Qatar in a long time. I invite you to come back. You'll fit right in from the moment you arrive, because we have all nationalities. You'll hear all languages. We have, various communities, and there's no real segregation. And I think culture plays a big role in that, because, as I said earlier, there is no hierarchy.
But let me ask you, Qatar has made a huge bet on museums, and you've built some absolutely superb museums. But one thing that slightly, well, it concerns me, but it's an issue, is that museum attendance worldwide is going down. Now, it varies, it's spotty, but it is actually going down. And that also coincides with a pretty significant drop in the number of people studying humanities who are interested in the arts.
I think it depends where you see, where you're looking at, right?
Well, if you look at humanities degrees, it's really frightening. It's right across the developed world. With museum attendances, obviously you've got the Louvre and things like that. It varies, and it's probably not the case in Qatar. But
no, we started very low, so we're going up.
but I suppose what I wanted to ask is, you know, you've invested in museums. Other nations just have shopping and sport. So do you think for the next 10 years, there's going to be continuing value in culture?
No, I definitely think there's almost like a cultural revolution in the Gulf. I think the investment, or, you know, I cannot take any credit for the idea of building museums. That was a vision my father had, and my brother continued. But if you see the domino effect now in the region, I mean, there's so many more museums, and the quality that we see in terms of top architecture and the importance of architecture and design, you know, that has to equate to the importance of the collection. For us, our region is 60% of our region are under 30. There's hunger for creativity. There's a lot of talent. And it's really very much rooted in our tradition and culture. I mean, we were craft maker, we were designers, and we're trying to reintroduce that so that craft making becomes trendy and not just something you find in the third world countries where, you know, first world countries exploit the talent. We actually want to elevate that and make it accessible to everybody. So I have no concern in terms of the number of visitors, because in our case, at least, I only see a trend, an increased trend in museums. Actually, there's more and more private museums opening.
Great, okay.
Like, I'll take you when you come. But yes, I'm not worried at all.
Okay, let me ask a final question of the three of you. We're talking about architecture. You, in all your ways, are distinguished architects. But where I live, I don't really see any architecture. Now, I live in London, and I just see development. And I went through an area called Brentford, which is a historic area, not very distinguished, but it's being overhauled by a big Irish developer who say they're going to create communities and a sense of belonging. And the prices start at $500,000. And they've knocked down the old community arts centre. Now this is happening, it's not just London, it's happening through cities throughout the world. It's just generic building, which is creating unaffordable housing. Now I know this is absolutely massive issue, we've got 8 minutes to discuss it, but I'd love to hear your thoughts about how this can be avoided to create a more positive sense of the future in our cities and communities. Stefano, good stuff. Stefano.
Sorry.
Yeah, no,
sorry.
I think that, well, for instance, I hope you have seen a very, let's say, strong and simple contribution about Vienna, Autriche. What makes that city so interesting today is the amount of public investment on social housing that the local government has done in the last 50 years. So the 43% of the real estate patrimony in Vienna is public or in social housing. So that means that it's possible to try to balance what you're saying about private real estate, let's say, developments. And that also is very important as architects, I mean, from my point of view, that we always try to make affordable what we do in our profession, that sometimes is also extremely expensive. Just to give an example, the Bosco Verticale, the vertical forest, it's a house for rich people now.
Yeah.
But this is the reason is very simple. So the cost of construction, the cost of research that we had done at the beginning were extremely high. But since its construction until now, what we have done is to do our best to demonstrate that it's possible to recreate, replicate that typology, and to make it affordable for everybody. And we have done it in
And sorry, you are actually creating affordable units, are you?
social housing, vertical forest in Holland, in China, and different parts of the world. And this more or less what also Norman has always done with his research.
So, Norman, how would you address the issue?
Well, I was going to use exactly the same example of Vienna.
It's quite famous.
That foundation has very close ties with that. But there are other examples. I mean, Singapore is a good example as well. It comes, I think, full circle round to your previous question about museums and humanities. And I think that your point of view is very Western-centric.
Yeah.
The action, the really interesting action, is where you've been describing in the Middle East, it's in Asia, and the tradition of education and the tradition of making things, which is central to our civilization, is alive and well. So, I mean, we're looking at popular football, Manchester United. We're looking at prefabricating that as it happens, in Dubai. And shipping that on Manchester Ship Canal and assembling it. So it's a much wider issue, and it comes down to research and education. And what we're hearing about Vienna is it's civic leadership. And that is alive and well in some parts of the world, and other parts of the world that you're describing. No, they've lost the plot. But the examples are there. It needs leadership. It's never about how much you spend. It's always about how wisely you spend it. And it's always about planning, enlightened planning.
Thank you. I think, to Norman and Stefano's points, I agree totally. Seeing that I'm the only one who's not an architect on the panel, I'm going to talk about the projects that we did where, as developers, if that's what you're going to call us, we chose to recycle buildings as opposed to demolish and restart again, which was really a practice, unfortunately, in some of the developing countries, thinking that by demolishing they can be more modern. I can talk about the fire station that's now become an artisan residence, to the point that it became so attractive that Wael Shawki is moving to Qatar to run it. Or the former Ministry of Interior that's become the NED, listed as one of the best hotels in the world, where we commissioned inside the hotel over 600 artisans and craftsmanship from our region, which created the trend, because then we saw shortly after a tender in the local newspaper for the local Four Seasons hotel of a $20 million tender for arts and craft in their hotels. And then we have now the Future Museum, which is the art mill that Alejandro Aravena is building, which is a flour mill and a bakery that's going to house the most important collection in terms of value. We could have chosen to go in the desert and build something from scratch, but we chose an old building, one from the 80s. And now, if you talked about London, I advise you to visit the new Chancery Hotel that will open very soon by David Chipperfield, which will also, at the center and heart of the hotel, will have a craftsmanship and creative center, which we will be managing on behalf of the Rosewood. So you see, as Norman said, it's all about vision and strategy. As much as civic institutions are important, government leaderships and decisions, strategic planning and long-term planning, because it's so easy to get distracted when great ideas come your way. But if these great ideas don't fit your strategy and don't really have local impact or value, then you're better off without it. So to me, it's all about having a clear vision and strategy and staying the course, because many people, I started very young, and many people gave themselves the privilege to come and tell me what to do. And thank goodness I had good advisors around me, and I had a father and a brother who were always great mentors that allowed us to stay the course and take the right decisions for the cultural institutions that we have built and those that we will be building.
Victor, sorry, Karen. But it's very interesting. It's so rare that you hear the word public housing. Very rare you hear the word planning. and political leadership. So it's all refreshing to hear how we might just be able to get it right, but we will see.
We want you to be optimistic.
Absolutely, absolutely. We have 1 minute, so let's have a couple of killer questions.
There's somebody there.
This is
This woman.
Thank you. I would like to ask Sheikha, if there is a moment from a project that you are involved in that truly changed minds, changed the way that we are thinking, that the people around you are thinking, in ways that surprised even you.
I think for me, I find my job to be a daily laboratory of ideas and creativity, because as much as you think you know, you discover you don't know anything. And I think that's part of the approach we've taken, to be very, to know where we want to go and the strategy, and to be very open-minded. And there are many instances where we made decisions based on intuition. And I can give you an example. When we built the Jean Nouvel building, I was highly criticized for 2 reasons. First, for the delay, because it took us about 10 years to open that museum. Second of all, because there was rumors that we had demolished the old palace, which was totally false. But with all the scaffolding, nobody really knew what was happening inside. So what we decided was, as we were thinking about how to hang art and crafts, the objects of the collection in the slanted walls of Jean Nouvel, that we would allow people to visit the building. And there was a lot of resistance in my, with my teams. I said, no, they're going to say this is a failed project that you couldn't finish. I said, no, let people experience the architecture and let them see the old palace that's still there. And actually it was the best idea we took, because as soon as we opened the museum, everybody who came said they felt their home because they had seen the whole process. So, sometimes you have to go against the trend to make a point.
wonderful. I think that's all we have time for. Thank you so much. That was
Thank you.
great.